Are you a woman in the corporate world striving to break barriers, challenge unconscious bias, and lead the way for women in leadership roles globally? If so, this is the podcast for you. Introducing Leading Ladies Who Lunch. The lunch hour is usually the time when colleagues get together for real, honest conversations about work, life, and everything in between. In each episode of Leading Ladies Who Lunch, we'll delve into insightful discussions and share actionable strategies to help you navigate corporate life. Co-hosted by me, Cicy George, a leadership development architect and inspirational speaker. I'm thrilled to share my experience and expertise on leadership, mentorship, and organizational intelligence to help you own your career.
And me, Rachel Lowndes, CEO and founder, imposter syndrome expert, and mindset coach at Rachel Lowndes Coaching and Consulting. Passionate about helping women conquer imposter syndrome and unleash their inner confidence to get the recognition and promotions they deserve.
Jam-packed with insightful conversations, expert advice, and inspiring stories from a diverse group, we'll explore how to overcome obstacles, shatter those glass ceilings, and build unshakable mindsets to unlock your true potential. So whether you're sipping a coffee or enjoying a meal at your desk, tune in for a no-host bar lunchtime chat. Episodes will be dropped every 2 weeks. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, one conversation at a time. Welcome back to the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast.
Okay, so today we are going to dive into the topic of a woman's definition of having it all. Now, society traditionally has dictated, or I'll say perhaps heavily influenced, what a woman pursues in her life, from both the subliminal messages to direct messages, choosing to pursue higher education and maybe a prestigious role or career, and of course, having the perfect family, and looking great all at the same time. Now, when we live in such a world that tells us we need to achieve and pursue all those things, it could come at a cost. So at what point did having it all become the norm and essentially burning us into the ground in this spiral of overachievement and comparison and fear of not matching up? That's why I think it's important to begin with this. So Rachel, what did the idea of having it all mean to you when you were growing up?
Yeah, I love this topic because having it all is such a different thing for each person. But having it all, to me, like, I grew up in a very traditional, white middle class family in England. My parents were teachers, so their idea of having it all was having like one of those careers where you were either doctor, lawyer, banker, or a teacher, right? And
right,
yeah, and you had like the perfect husband and the two perfect kids and the
of
white
course,
fence type home. And so that was like what it meant by having it all. But that kind of didn't really necessarily resonate with me as a person. And so I found it actually quite difficult to connect to that. And I really think that a lot of that comes from, obviously that is, conditioning, right? Because that's what I grew up with and that's what is kind of expected of me. So there's a lot of unconscious bias involved in all of that. And I feel like it's quite patriarchal, old school thinking that the definition of having it all is a husband, two kids, a decentish job and a nice house and all that kind of thing. And if you don't have that, then you've essentially failed, which is a lot of the time how I felt at home, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what about you, Cicy? What was your version of having it all?
I think there are some similarities despite the obvious differences in upbringing. I think there definitely are similarities to that, and to be honest, my version of having it all might have been based on primarily what I saw on TV growing up in the 90s. So I like to think I had two versions of this idea. I had the fantasy version, which was this image of a woman dressed in her power suit with her high heels. She's managing the career, the family, managing to make it home in time to prepare a meal from scratch, no less.
Right.
and looking glamorous all at the same time.
Mm.
I saw her as having sort of this like it factor, if you will.
Mhm.
And then I had the realistic version. Now, my own mom, my parents, came here in the mid 1970s. She worked for almost 40 years as a nurse. And being a nurse was just who she was. It was part of her persona. She wasn't just a nurse in the job sense per se, but
Right.
also a nurse to every single person I've known in my entire life. That
Right.
was just who she was. And so advancing beyond a staff level nurse really wasn't on her, you know, goal list, if you will. She just wanted to be able to provide for her family. So I
Mm.
have the fantasy version of this woman wearing a high powered suit, going into the city and doing her 9 to 5 thing. But then I also had reality of my mom working 7 to 3 and being home when I came home from school and nagging me about my homework and whatever else I didn't do.
Mm.
And I never really saw myself as a staff nurse. I never saw myself in the medical profession. So I automatically tried to make the reality version and the fantasy version somehow come together. So throw into the mix the compounding factor of, oh, yeah, I grew up in an Indian family. So no matter what career I had, you
Mm.
have to make sure you have the husband and a minimum of 2 kids.
Right.
That was the expectation. There was no, oh, yeah, just go and pursue your career. The conversation was very different. It was, yeah, make sure you go to college, you become educated and get a job,
Yeah.
but we need to make sure we get you married off. So it was
Yeah.
like this thing that, okay, I have to, it almost felt like I had two goalposts. I
Yeah.
had go find a job and get married.
Yeah.
My parents worried about who I was going to marry. In fact, it's such a thing in traditional Indian households where, even your older brother will be responsible for
Wow.
you getting married off.
Wow.
Sometimes older brother looks into the field, who can I marry my little sister off?
All right.
So,
Yeah, I mean that's very culturally kind of relevant, isn't it? Because in the Indian culture, obviously, education is seen as a path to success. So you must have an education, and then couple that with the fact that you must get married as well. Like super important to get married and to the right person, and from
right.
from that kind of perspective, which is an added pressure. And did your parents ever say to you, you must also pursue a high powered career? And did they encourage you to do that, or were they just like, as long as you have a good job and you have a husband, everything's all okay?
It was more of the latter. It was more of make sure you have a stable career, which is why a lot of Indian traditional households will, influence their children to pursue careers in the medical profession or as in legal as a lawyer. Your choices obviously were either be a doctor or a
Mm,
lawyer or an
mm,
engineer. You had
mm,
really three potential career paths. So
right.
me being in HR and leadership development, my parents have no idea today what I do.
No.
They they cannot even explain it to you. If you were to ask them, "Hey, what does your daughter do for a living?" They'll say, "Oh, I don't know. She works for Macy's. She's in some type of coordinating thing." That is their version of what I do for a living. Yet somehow what I do for a living has managed to pay my bills and I still
Mm,
live in a comfortable home. They have
yeah.
no idea what it means. And when I try to explain to them, sort of some of my work challenges, it's so hard for them to wrap their brains around it because doing something like this is so different from what they know. It puts
Yeah.
them out of their comfort zone. So
Yeah.
I had to sort of combine and congeal these two versions to make it fit for me. But, to be honest, when I was in my 20s, this fantasy version was still something I held on to, even probably until my very early 30s. And it wasn't until my mid to late 30s that I was really spending some time thinking about, well, wait, that's not what I agree with. So why am I pursuing having that high powered career and I mean, like, why am I going after
Mm,
trying to check all the check boxes,
mm, mm-hmm. And that's completely coming from obviously background and conditioning and what is expected of us. Now, similarly, I had like that moment around my mid-30s where I was like, wait, what am I actually doing with my life? Like, I'm not really that happy. I was encouraged to get married rich, basically. I think my parents just didn't think that I was capable of anything, to be honest. Like, that's the message I seem to be getting.
Oh
Is
no.
like, oh God, you're no good. You're going to have to get married. Right. And,
Right.
and when
You're
you,
just a failure.
yeah. And so I pursued a lot of like avenues where I never really believed in myself. And so the idea of having it all was I must get married and have 2 kids because otherwise I'm not going to have it all. And
Right.
and then I got to like my mid-30s. I was like, this kind of just doesn't, I don't know what I'm doing. This doesn't sit well with me. I need to do something different with my life so that I can feel a bit more at one with what having it all really means to me.
Right.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. So it seems like there's this belief that we need these certain things in our life and we need to
Mm.
achieve certain things so we can reach that pinnacle stature of quote unquote having it all. But as I'm sensing from what we're both each sharing here, this could be very problematic. So why do you think it's important for us as individuals to define what it means to have it all on our own terms?
Yeah, I think, it's super important for us to actually look at that in terms of like what success means to us, what kind of impact we want to have on the world, and what actually, where we get meaning in our life and meaning in our work, because we can have this definition of having it all, which is someone else's definition, let's face it, right? So we're living up to these
Right.
so-called expectations that we leave the education system, we leave the home with these expectations that having it all is defined as this X, what
Sure.
we just talked about. And reality, that has nothing to do with who we are as people, what we really want. And so we have to redefine it and ask ourselves, what does success really mean to me? What kind of impact do I want to have on the world? And where do I get meaning so that I wake up every day and I go to work and I'm happy and I'm, being kind to people and all these simple things that actually bring so much joy into our lives. And so, yeah, you have to kind of really look at redefining what that means to you outside of the expectations, like cut those off and just go, right, that's not me, or decide that whether parts of that are you, and then bring in parts of you that kind of work together with that. Would you kind of agree with something like that?
Absolutely, especially the part about, it because it brings you your purpose, it brings you meaning and joy. And if we don't, it's interesting because when I was very early in my career, even to middle of my career, I never once heard anyone talk about you need to find purpose in your
Mm,
work. It
mm,
was always about work is just a means to an end. Work
mm-hmm.
is essentially a company is buying your time,
Yeah.
right? It's an exchange of service and goods.
Mm,
So the company is buying our time. So I never really heard about how, that you should find meaning and joy and do what fulfills you.
mm,
So I see this as being problematic to highlight the point that you're just making, and also to add that if we don't have conversations like this, if we don't bring this issue into the forefront, then the other women who are growing up into their careers and even listening here might progress through their career thinking that, yes, I have to go and I have to achieve that pinnacle stature of having it all,
mm-hmm.
and not think about what having it all really means to them as
Mm-hmm.
an individual, and not because of what my parents or my family or society or TikTok or the media has portrayed to me that I need to have. And so, the pressure of having it all, honestly, is just not realistic. It leads, as we know, to burnout and depression and discontent. You're chasing a fairy tale, and that itself is damaging because you're not aligning what you are chasing to who you are.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm telling you, as much as I sit here talking about this is a realization I've only had in the last couple of years. And it's once I found this, once I figured out what my true purpose in my values and all my effort, all my work is going towards, I just feel like things click. Like
Mm,
now it makes sense. And
mm,
for me, the definition of having it all looks very different. I'm not pursuing a high-powered career because I want to wear a fancy designer suit with the fancy, be it
Although
Louis
that is
Vuitton or
nice.
whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly, or whatever heels. I mean, girl, I'm a flats girl these days, okay? So forget the heels.
Yeah.
I'm not doing
Stuff
those.
that.
But I'm not chasing that because that's not what may make me really happy. What
Mm,
would make me happy is knowing that whatever effort I put in, I can see an impact.
yeah.
I'm My work is purposeful, and there are people who are benefiting from the work, the ideas, the perspective, the thinking that I'm putting out there. That plus I do have a family.
Mm,
I have the basic things that I need. I don't need more than that. But that's unique to me. Everyone has to figure out
yeah.
what is going to give them their version of the pinnacle, having it all. Rachel, what do you think?
Well, I feel like it's very interesting you say that, because I feel like you get to that point, maybe, I don't know about yourself, but definitely around your like mid 30s, kind of late 30s, because finding purpose in your work, right? You're not going to come out of university and go, right, I'm going to find purposeful work, because you really don't have an idea, right? And I think
Right.
there's a lot of pressure on youngsters today that they must go into a job and it must be meaningful and it must be purposeful and we must have impact and all that kind of thing. And I think we need to take away that pressure and just say it's actually okay for you to experiment a little bit, right? With
Right.
different jobs, different kind of roles, different careers and industries, even. When we were coming through the ranks, it was kind of frowned upon to chop and change your job. And nowadays, I think it's absolutely okay to do that, because your 20s, it's oh, sorry, not my microphone over there, is the time, it's getting very passionate. It's the time to experiment with these things and not be so hard on yourself, because once you kind of grab little snippets of life from everywhere, then you can start to understand, okay, what do I actually really want to do? And then you can direct your life in a way that does give you that impact, that meaning, and you don't have to feel the need to wear the high-powered suit and the stilettos that hurt your feet and get your hair coiffed every day and like slot into some kind of ideality of who we're supposed to be. Is ideality a word? I think I made that up. Anyway,
I think you're making it up.
of what we're supposed to look like. And I think, for me, obviously, I've got a 25-year career in advertising. And for the majority of that, I don't think I've ever really identified as someone who had a career in advertising. I didn't attach much meaning to my work. It's only now that I can attach meaning to work, because I can actually see my worth. I can see what I give to a company, to the culture, and start to redefine what leadership means to me, what it means to add to a culture. And so that's come much later in life for me.
Sure.
I haven't got married. I don't have children. So I didn't really achieve that so-called pinnacle of what having it all meant. But now I feel like I do have it all, because I've got meaning and purpose to the work that I do. And now I'm coaching and I can help people understand that for themselves. And so even though I work really, really hard as an entrepreneur, like harder than I've ever worked, it doesn't feel like work. I just enjoy everything that I do. And yeah, I just, that is having it all, like that is meaning for me.
Yeah, I think you just highlighted a really important piece, and that's, when we talk about having passion and purpose for your work, you're right. Someone listening might think, oh my God, I need to go out tomorrow and figure out what my passion is. And I'm 19. That's not the case. I mean, it has taken years for you and I to figure out what that passion is. And it doesn't just come overnight. It doesn't come after working for 5 or 6 years. It could, not to say that it wouldn't, but for me, this passion that I finally come to a stark realization on, it took years of me doing the work, trying to figure out, what am I good at? What do I like?
Yeah.
What is fun for me? And I had to go through a number of career pivots to do that. It was not easy. I had to experience a lot to get to where I am, and feeling like I finally know. You know that question you get asked when you're a little kid, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah. Who knows?
I feel like I can finally answer that question.
What was your actual answer when you were a child, though?
I think I wanted to be honest, this might sound a little corny. I'm sorry in advance, but I wanted to be an Air India flight stewardess.
I
I
love it.
just thought they were so glamorous. Carrying, like they wore their saris perfectly. My mom always complimented how beautiful they wore their saris. It looked perfectly done. Their hair, their makeup, the way they serve. I just thought it was so glamorous being a stewardess. So I
Yeah.
wanted to be an Air India stewardess. It was so really funny.
Well, conversely, I wanted to be a tennis racket. So yeah, racket, not a player. I said
Really?
racket. I know.
You did?
I've
Okay.
never let
I
me
was
live
like,
that down. So
I was like, wait, is my mic, is my output going wrong?
I know, I know. That's the kind of child I was.
Yet here you are doing all these amazing things. It's very impressive to do it and to make it. You know, I have to admire the entrepreneurial spirit that you have. It's really inspiring. So
Thank you.
as you know, it's taken years to get there. It didn't just happen, you know,
No.
year one into your career. You know, obviously you've gained all this experience to get to where you are, to be able to now coach and lead others
Mm,
effectively. So it really does take time. And, you know, I think that's the part that sometimes people forget, that you need to put the time and do the work to
mm.
really see what that is for yourself. And that's okay. I mean, there's that quote, right? It's all about the journey, not the destination. I don't know who said that quote, but I know I've seen
No.
it somewhere.
I think to that point as well, like for anyone who is starting out in their career or kind of low, kind of early in their career who's listening, is that it is important to actually take that journey. And that, what I mean by that is, don't be afraid of the entry level jobs. Don't be afraid of like actually learning, getting your hands dirty and being in the weeds, because being in the weeds means that when you get to leadership, you know what that feels like, and you can empathize
Exactly.
with the people who are working for you in your team. And there is a lot of value in having that knowledge when you move into those leadership roles. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think I find it all too often that the higher you climb, the more people forget what it's like. That's why when
Mm,
we're talking about leadership in our organization, we talk a lot about being authentic and humble, to
mm,
humble yourself down, because leadership is not about glitz and glamour. It's
mm.
more about servitude than it is about, oh,
Yeah.
I want to have 1,000 followers. That's not what leadership is. Maybe
No.
on social media, that means something. But in
Mm,
the workplace, it means more to me if I feel like I have you as a leader who will have my back when it counts.
mhm.
It's not about the number of people on your team, how much money you make, how big your office is. None of those things matter. What
No.
matters is, are you responsible for the people who are in your charge?
Yeah.
And do you take that seriously? Do you invest in them? Do you
Yeah.
guide them? Do you support them when it matters? Do you check in with them? Have you forged relationships with them? So I think, for that, and that's what finding my passion really has led to, is this idea that, I want to grow those leaders. So for me, this true all-encompassing definition of having it all is this, I've got the family, everyone is healthy. I was able to pursue a master's. That was a goal that I had on my list for myself.
Mm,
And also now realizing that my career, I wanted focused solely on leadership and growing leaders who are authentic and servant.
yeah.
That has now is what I would now consider my definition of having it all. So having it all for me right now is kind of where I am
Yeah.
in a way.
And that really does come down to defining success on your own terms, right? So success for
Right.
you means having a healthy family who are thriving, being able to pursue your goal of like leveling up your education and having a job where you can make an impact on people, right? And that is your definition of success. And that's why it's really important when we look at this overarching umbrella of having it all, is defining what are your success metrics, what makes you happy, what makes you feel fulfilled. And a lot of the time, we define success as, yes, I've got a salary that's this big and this job title, but really that's not success. That's just labeling.
Right.
Success is like waking up in the morning and going to the Pilates class and then going to work and knowing that your team are happy and you're thriving and you're reaching your goals together. That
Yes.
is the definition of success.
Correct. Correct.
Right? Rather than I've reached this job title, but actually I hate it and I'm not happy and I don't like my manager nor my team are
Right.
assholes, whatever.
Right. Right. So, Rachel, what do you think people can do to help define that word success and having it all for themselves? What would you say are some, key tangible things people can do for themselves?
Yeah, I think when we're looking at success, it's really important to tie everything back to what your core values are, right? So understanding what is meaningful for you from a values perspective. A lot of time with my clients, or every time I work with a new client, we do the values exercise. We define what the top 5 core values are. And throughout our coaching sessions, we work, I always bring them back to their values. Like, how does that decision align with what is important to you? And so then you can define success, what that means to you, along with your core values. So I think that's a really important thing that people can do. And kind of identify that from there and define what that success really means to you. And then, as I say, align those decisions and actions with those values.
Absolutely. It's something that we talk a lot about, is why it's important to reflect on, if someone had to ask what your top 5 values are, to be able to answer that and then centering your life on those values, because it's our values that drive us. Our values are, really the subliminal message in our interactions, in what we say, what we do with our lives, and what we do in terms of how we treat people. So it really is important to work on and reflect for yourself, what are my top values, and defining your measure of success, and the barometer in which you measure yourself will be against that.
Yeah. I mean, your values are like your GPS, essentially, right? So they're your internal moral compass, your GPS. And then once you've got those values kind of set down, then you can start actually defining your goals, which are aligned to your values, which will then be attached to what success means for you, which will be attached to what your definition of having it all means to you, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, definitely get clear on those values so we can use that to align and to, connect to our goals. Amazing to hear about your definition of success and combining that with everything that I've shared as well.
Yeah, I've loved this chat today with you, Cicy. As always, we've put the worlds to rights. We've shared our definition of success and what it means to have it all. And I've also told the world that I wanted to be a tennis racket when I was younger.
Well, we can't forget that part. That has to be my favorite part of the whole part. Remember, the definition of having it all is really up to you. So take the time to think about and get real clear about your core values and aligning that to your life's purpose and goals to that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast.
Remember, you can find us and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. Subscribe to stay up to date with the latest episodes and follow us on Instagram, Leading Ladies Who Lunch.
Tune in 2 weeks where we will be talking all about a woman's voice in the workplace. Find your voice and speak up with confidence.
Until then, stay sassy. Thank you for joining us on the empowering journey at the Leading Ladies Who Lunch podcast. We hope you've enjoyed our insightful discussions, actionable strategies, and inspiring stories that we break down during each episode. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Leading Ladies Who Lunch on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Now remember, the conversations you've heard on this podcast are just the beginning of your journey. Let your voice be heard, inspire change, and continue breaking barriers as you lead with authenticity, resilience, and unwavering determination.
Until next time, keep embracing your leadership potential, challenging the norms, and shaping a better world for women in the workplace. Leading Ladies Who Lunch, empowering women, changing lives.